Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. Night two of the NFL Combine is in the books. The tight ends, the defensive backs, including the corners and the safeties, took to the field today in Indianapolis, and there is a lot to break down as the defensive players have now finished off their combine. The offensive players got it going with the tight ends. And then obviously still 2 more big days of the NFL Combine. We have wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks tomorrow, and then the O-line finish it out on Sunday. Here at Saturday Sunday, we continue to cover it wire to wire. If you have been following along on Twitter, I have been live tweeting every single 40-time run, my film thoughts on every single prospect that is ran, a draft projection of where I think they're going to currently go based on what I'm hearing and what's out there to try to get them in the right area of what the league and the draft gurus and the people with the inside information are saying right now. Sharing film clips, sharing the other drills like the broad jump or vertical jump, the gauntlet runs, and any other drills that I deem viable. Obviously, the RAS scores, Ken Platt, shout out to him. Always a great follow during the NFL Combine. So been covering it wire to wire, responding to every single message that anybody sends me, and we'll continue to do that tomorrow, especially when we start getting all the offensive guys going. If there's any dynasty questions, any fantasy questions, dynasty rookie drafts, please do not hesitate to reach out, and I will make sure I get to every single one and reply back to it at some point during the day. But let's kind of jump right into it with the instant reaction pod for day 2 of the NFL Combine. And let's start, even though they concluded the night, let's start with the tight end group, since we talk about them more here at Saturday, Sunday. A lot of our listeners, I know, play fantasy, play dynasty, in addition to being interested in the NFL draft. So let's start with the tight end group. And the top 4 tight ends, none of them ran the 40-yard dashes. Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, Elijah Arroyo. Mason Taylor did not run the 40, but he did partake in the drills, and he looked like he was just at a different level compared to all the other tight ends that did do the on-field drills. So Mason Taylor, I tweeted it out. To me, he's much closer to Loveland and Warren than anybody besides Elijah Arroyo is close to him in the next group of prospects. And I think even without Taylor doing much here except the on-field drills, I think he cemented himself as the clear second tier tight end 3, tight end 4 with a much closer upside to the top 2 guys than anybody after the top 4 in this class. He just looks so smooth in the on-field work, the change of direction stuff, the hands. He is plenty big enough to play in line, even though his best position might be really taking advantage of that athleticism, the pass catching upside in terms of like a move tight end. But you can do a lot of different things with Mason Taylor. I think he's coming off the board, the top 10 picks of the second round. I know I've talked a lot about, I know my Giants are going to be picking there. Mason Taylor, if they held on to that second round pick, if they didn't use it in a trade up to get to the first pick overall, getting a young tight end to pair with a rookie quarterback and Malik Neighbors would be a really intriguing way to kind of build your offense for a young quarterback, giving him hopefully that long-term tight end and Neighbors would, I think, be 2 guys that would really create an easy environment in terms of pass catchers for a young quarterback that's developing. So I think Mason Taylor should be in that top 5, top 10 picks of the second round. We'll see if that materializes in April. In terms of the guys who ran the 40 and then overall the complete package this week, the 3 big winners from the entire day, Mason Taylor, I wanted to kind of do separate because he only did the on-field drills. But the ones who tested out, I would say 4 winners. The 4 winners are these. We have Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, 6'5", 247. He ran a 4.63 40, 1.56 10-yard split, had a 39-inch vert, and a 10.9 broad. Those are fantastic numbers for a guy who I had originally in that like early day 3 range. I think he's now put himself in the mix to maybe sneak in the back end of round 3. I still don't think that's where he belongs, but I think he's now went from a 4 or 5 round prospect to a round 3, round 4 prospect. So I thought Ferguson really helped himself out a lot. Second tight end that I really thought helped himself out was Joshua Simon out of South Carolina. He's been a little bit of a pre-draft since the season ended riser. 6'4", 239. He ran a 4.65 40, 1.58 10-yard split. He had a 38-inch vert, 10.4 broad. Smooth. He's a pass-catching option only. But I thought he really checked a lot of boxes in terms of his athleticism and his upside. And then Thomas Fidone, I talked about him on the podcast where I talked about 6 under-the-radar guys that are seeing their stock rise and will continue to see a rise in the pre-draft process. Thomas Fidone was on that list. He checked in at 6'5", 243 pounds, 4.7 40 with a 1.57 10-yard split, at a 39.5-inch vert and a 10.6 broad. So to me, those are the 3 biggest winners that ran the 40 and in terms of the rest of the athletic testing and the on-field drills. One other name that I would kind of add to that mix is Jalen Conyers. He had a 4.74 40, 35-inch vert, 10.1 broad, but then he had a 4.27 short shuttle, and then he had a 6.94 three cone. He is only 1 out of 149 tight ends to ever do the three cone to get that low of a score at 260 or plus pounds. So Jalen Conyers is the 4th big winner here. We had talked about him maybe previewing, I think, or to recap on the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl recap show. Conyers is a very interesting player. You could use him in a variety of ways, but I think he helped himself out a lot here as well. So Ferguson, Simon, Fidone, Conyers, I think could all see their stock rise a little bit here. Mason Taylor doesn't really see his stock rise. He's already locked in there. I think that top 10, top 15 picks in round 2. But all the other guys I think might have helped their stock. Take this to the flip side. A couple guys who I hate using the word losers, so I'll say stock slightly down. Jake Bradenstool, I really thought he was going to test out as a better athlete. I think that's was going to be his bread and butter, that he had to be a good athlete, and he really just tested out as an average athlete. And the film this year kind of matched up more with that. I was kind of hoping when I had watched him last summer, I thought I saw a pretty good athlete to a very good athlete. And then this year when I watched him, I didn't see that same level of athleticism and pass catching upside. And I think now he ran a 4.75 40, average jumps for a guy with his frame. I think he still got some pass catching chops to him, but I think he's more of a possession type now move tight end, and that's not going to move the needle. I think any shot at him being a late round 3 or early round 4 draft pick probably went out the window with this. I think he's more probably now in that round 5 mix. Harold Fannin Jr., obviously big topic of conversation, especially if you go on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Checked in at 6'3", 241. So he added a little bit of weight. I'm sure that was to kind of get to that 240 number. Looks a little bit better for a tight end, but still very undersized. I was concerned about this. I said since the Senior Bowl that if he couldn't run a 4.6 to 4.65 40, if I was his agent, if I was his team, I would tell him to never run the 40. Rest on that elite production and hope that somebody still took you in round 3. Because if you run and you test poorly, I think that's going to hurt your draft stock more than if you just say I'm not running the 40. So in this case, he ran a 4. I think the official was a 4 point. I think it was a 4.71, which is not ideal for a guy who's 6'4", 6'3", 241. He's not a blocker. You saw that even in the on-field drills. This is not a guy who is going to do much in terms of blocking. I don't care what he might have done against the level of competition in college, mostly in space. It's just not who he is. So he's not going to be asked to block much. So inline is off the table. And then if he's just going to be like a big slot, that athletic testing is not very good. If a wide receiver was to run that, and we would say, I don't even know if he can make it as a big slot. So there's definitely some level of concern. Now, listen, we've seen some guys. Isaiah Likely didn't run at the combine. He had a really slow time at his pro day. He had good college production as well, but he weighed a little bit more. He was a little bit taller, and he also went in the 5th round. People have been talking about Harold Fannin as a 2nd or 3rd round guy. I never thought the 2nd round was realistic. I thought maybe the 3rd round. I think Chigakonko is a pretty good comp in terms of the size and frame, but Chig ran a 4.52. Harold Fannin ran a 4.71. Now, Fannin did have 2 decent scores in terms of the change of direction stuff, but let's put it into perspective. He's 240. Like, he should be able to run the recone in under 7 seconds at 241 pounds, where pass catching is his main thing. He had a 34-inch vert, 910 on the broad jump. So Fannin, I think, maybe not as clear now a day 2 prospect. It'll be interesting to kind of see what the NFL views it, but I think there's going to be some concerns about this 40 time for a guy at his size, at his frame, when you're drafting him solely to be predominantly a big-time pass-catching weapon, but he doesn't really have the athleticism to do that. So I wonder if now he's more of a round 4 guy. And then 2 guys who I think really, really hurt inserter stock. I'll go with the lesser one first for a second. Bryson Nesbitt, I thought once upon a time was going to be a good athlete. There were talks last year that he might come out. People thought he could be a really good, after playing with Drake May. The year before, there was a lot of buzz with him. And even this year, I was wondering why there wasn't more buzz. Well, I think now we start to understand why. He's just not a good athlete. He ran a 4. He was like a 4.89 40. That's just not what you're talking about. Nesbitt doesn't block. He's a jumbo wide receiver or a big slot move tight end type, and he tested out as a horrendous athlete. So I guess that kind of speaks to volumes of why we haven't seen any buzz for Bryson Nesbitt. But the one who I struggle to understand why his agent, his team, let him do any of the athletic testing, let him run the 40, and that's Gunnar Helm, a guy who before the combine, I would have said was a lock, not a possible, a lock day 2 prospect. He goes out there. He was in everybody's top 100s. If anybody was doing like a 3-round mock draft, he was without a doubt somewhere in the 3rd round. There are people who even thought maybe he could go late round 2. We saw guys like Brenton Strange and Schoonmaker go in that area. And then Gunnar Helm goes out there and runs a 4.84 40. And that was after the first one was like a 4.9 something. He improved it a little bit. But we're talking about a guy only had like a 30 on the jump, on the vertical, did not test out as a bad athlete, tested out as a really bad athlete. And then you just kind of wonder, like, the film was good. He looked like he had more movement skills and more athleticism than this. Obviously, they had to have a pretty good sense of what he was going to run. Tight end athleticism matters a lot at the next level. I just would not have let him put this. I think his RAS score was like 2.6 something, which is like, we're talking about like historically bad athletic testing here from Gunnar Helm. And he dropped weight. I think he was down to like the low 240s when his listed college weight was like 250. So Gunnar Helm has a guy who looked to be a day 2 pick. Now I think you're wondering, could he go in round 4? Is he a round 5 pick now? Can he improve these numbers a little bit by his pro day? But he was definitely, I can't remember another combine performance that I think hurt somebody's stock more, because I think a lot of time the narrative is, oh, it really hurt his stock, but in reality, I don't really think it did sometimes. Like, people panicked over like Calvin Ridley, I remember, but those were minor things and it didn't even impact and move the needle at all. But tight end athleticism matters. And this level of not, like, if he tested out as an average athlete, I would have said round 3, round 4, still a possibility. If he tested out as a good athlete, I would have said day 2 is a lock. But testing out this poorly now brings in the question. And when you now say stack him up against Ferguson and Joshua Simon and Thomas Fedone, and you start to say, we can get a guy who is just as big in Ferguson or Fedone, same size in terms of their weight, but way more athletic. Is the team going to take Gunnar Helm over Thomas Fedone or Terrence Ferguson? I'm not sure. I don't think so. And then you talk about a guy like Joshua Simon. If you want a move pass catching guy, Simon might go ahead of Gunnar Helm. Maybe a team falls in love with the former wide receiver Rondé Gadsden, who didn't run the 40 today, probably because he knew he wasn't going to run very fast. And I think his team was smart enough to probably say, don't run it. It's only going to hurt yours. So I look at this now, and I think 4 tight ends should go in the top 100. I think 2 should go in round 1. I think Arroyo and Mason Taylor should go at the top of round 2. And then I think everybody else, Harold Fannin, early date Baree, Ferguson, early date Baree, Fedone, early date Baree, Gunnar Helm somewhere in there, but definitely a guy who really hurt his stock. We'll see if anything he can do in the rest of the pre-draft process can salvage it all, but I find it very hard to believe that. So that was the tight end groups. I thought the tight end group left a lot to be desired in terms of what we saw earlier in the day. If I spin this over to the defensive backs, and let's just go in the order now in which they performed. And the first DB group was the cornerbacks, and there were a lot of cornerbacks that shine. So I'm just going to kind of go here in alphabetical order for the most part in terms of the full package today. Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, the 6 feet, 195-pound corner. He ran a 4.4340. That was a really good time for him. Was not expecting that. Had a 10.6 broad. I think he's squarely now on that round 3, round 4 radar that he answered the speed question, which, let's be honest, the speed question for cornerbacks and even safeties is very important. The combine workouts matter a lot for the defensive backs. It's an important position. Jahdi Barron out of Texas. He's been a polarizing guy. Like Dan Jeremiah's had him like it's a top 10, top 12 player. Todd McShay loved him, but then other people thought he was a round 2 prospect. I think Barron going out there running a 4.4040, and he was mad about it. I think the official might have even been 4.39. 35-inch vert, 10.3 on the broad, didn't do the on-field workouts. But I think now he has shown with that speed and athleticism that he maybe could potentially even play on the outside as well. And I think that's going to be big for his stock. I thought he was going to go round 1, even if he was more of a nickel guy. Now I think he's got versatility to do a lot of different things at that. I think Barron's a lock to go in round 1. Zach Frazier out of UTSA, 6'3", 186 pounds. He ran a 4.3640. He had a 10.6 broad as well and a 36.5 vert. I think those smaller school prospects, this is what I talked about, the SATs of the draft process. You put them all in the same playing field, and a guy from UTSA can come there and really shine in the athletic testing. I think now you see his stock. I think he was a day Baree guy. I think he has a chance maybe to move himself into the early day Baree portion of the NFL draft. I think arguably one of the biggest winners in terms of the cornerbacks was Maxwell Hairston, 5'11", 183 pounds. I thought he was already on that round 1, round 2 border, and most people had him as a round 2 guy, but I really love his play. And then he goes out there, runs a 4.2840, 39.5-inch vert, 10.9 broad. I have a hard time to believe with that athletic testing, plus the film that his film is really good. I have a hard time seeing Hairston not being a round 1 pick. Teams in that 20 to 32 range. A lot of teams could always use more corner help. I think Hairston could provide that in the latter part of round 1. Mac McWilliams at a UCF, I thought he tested out better. I thought he was going to maybe test out as like an average to above average athlete. He tested out as a really good athlete, 4.41 in the 40 at 5'10", 191 pounds, and he looked really smooth in the drill. So I thought Mac McWilliams was the guy who helped himself out, maybe put himself now in the earlier portion of day Baree than the later portion of day Baree. Jacob Parrish out of K-State, he looked unbelievable. On-field drills, athletic testing, 5'9", 191. He ran a 4.3540, 37.5-inch vert, 10.9 on the broad. I think he's now locked into that round 3, early round 4 range as a really prolific guy who has that inside-outside versatility. I think he's going to play on the inside, but this was a big day for Jacob Parrish. Darren Porter out of Iowa State, wide receiver background, turned cornerback. I think he was on that bubble of round 3, round 4. Well, how do you get off that bubble, which is why the combine's so great? You might be on that bubble of round 3, round 4. Well, you want to get off that bubble and lock yourself into day 2? He did it today. 6'3", 195 pounds, 4.3 on the 40, 36.5 on the vert. Tested out, unbelievable. Those athletic testing numbers and the upside he presents. I don't think it's a round 3, round 4 discussion anymore. I think it's a day 2 lock discussion. And where does he go on day 2? So let's stock up on him. Caleb Ransaw out of Tulane, 5'11", 197. He ran a 4.3, 40-inch on the vert, 10.9 on the broad, and he looked really smooth in the drills. So we're talking about a guy that sees the opportunity here. I think he's early day 3 right now. It's still maybe the possibility for that projection to even continue to rise. I thought Quincy Riley out of Louisville, he was one of the best cornerbacks at the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked really good in the on-field drills, very smooth. I think he's still locked in for a day 2 grade for him. If we pivot this over to the second DB group, which was the safety group, not nearly as many guys had amazing testing or helped themselves out, but there obviously were some that did. Again, just going alphabetical order here. Billy Bowman out of Oklahoma, very polarizing prospect, because when I watched his film and I watched him play during the season, I didn't know why he wasn't generating as much buzz. Even now, there are some people that think he's like a definitive day 3 guy. I think he's in that round 3, round 4 border, and he came out today and I think tested out way better athletically than any people thought. 5'9", 192, 4.42 40, 35.5 on the vert, 10.3 on the broad. I think he's now locked into that late round 3 to early round 4 range. Could even see a team picking him in the mid round 3. I'm intrigued by his versatile skill set, so I think he really helped himself out a lot. Nick Amamura out of South Carolina, we knew he was going to be an alien in terms of his athletic testing, and that played itself out. 6'3", 220. He ran a 4.38 40, 1.49 10-yard split. He had a 43-inch vert, 11.6 broad. I already had a round 1 projection on him. This just solidified it. If there was any question of whether or not it was going to go round 1 or maybe slip to the early portion of round 2, I think this testing from him today in just how freakish it was at 6'3", 220, I think ends that discussion. Real chance to be the first safety taken. I think Malachi Starks is going to have something to say about that. But Malachi Starks is a guy, he looked really good in the drills. And some of the next-gen stats in terms of how fast he went through some of the drills today were really impressive numbers. He ran a 4.5 on the 40, 1.51 on the 10-yard split. He had a 33-inch vert. I think he's on that round 1, round 2 border. I think he's a round 1 guy. But, again, with the safety position, we've seen good safeties in college. We've seen Landon Collins. We've seen who else I'm thinking of? Brian Branch. Like, there's been good safeties that have fallen to the top of the second round. So I don't think it's crazy to think that Xavier McKinney, another one, McKinney, Landon Collins, Branch, all 3 of them were once upon a time thought as round 1 locked. And then as the draft got closer, you started to see some people saying, maybe they could fall to the top of the round 2 or somewhere early portion of round 2. I could see that being the case with Malachi Starks. I think it would be foolish. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah's first mock or second mock had him fall into the Eagles' laps. That seems like a typical thing that would happen, that the Eagles just sit there at 32 and they get another stud Georgia prospect in Malachi Starks. But I do think he's on that round 1, round 2 border. But he looked really good in the on-field drills. Probably the best of anybody from the safety group in terms of how smooth he looked in the on-field drills. Couple other guys who wanted to make note of. I know Jalen Reed out of Penn State and Jonas Sanker out of Virginia. I think Sanker's in that early day 3 range. Reed may have pushed himself there as well. Both ran quality 40 times, good jumps, and then also looked really good in the on-field drills. I think Sanker, of the 2, surprised more in terms of athleticism. A 4.48 40, 36.5 on the vert, 10.8 on the broad. I think those are some surprising numbers from Sanker to really help his stock as well. So there it is, guys. My instant reaction thoughts to everything that happened on day 2 of the NFL Combine. Obviously, some other big news. The Matthew Stafford thing has now been resolved. Sounds like he was never really interested in the Giants, maybe using them for leverage. I know the Giants were very interested. The Raiders were very interested. But Stafford and the Rams came to an agreement to, rework his contract in some way. None of the numbers have came out yet. So that domino has now fallen. And then the next buzz was Aaron Rodgers might be next on the Giants' radar. As someone who follows, if you follow the show a lot, everyone knows I'm a Giants fan. My thoughts on that is, in terms of what the edict was from ownership, was you got to win next year. And Dable and Joe Shane trying to save their jobs. I think Aaron Rodgers on a 1-year deal and draft a rookie at 3 was always the best plan of action, always made the most sense. Of the available veteran quarterbacks, the Russell Wilsons, and the people like that, Justin Fields, who else? Jimmy Garoppolo, Jameis Winston. Aaron Rodgers is so far above them. Yes, he comes with an ego. He comes with a lot of weirdness and strangeness, but he still can play the game. 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 4,000 yards, and the Jets were a dumpster fire last year. So to me, Aaron Rodgers on a one-year deal, and then you draft the quarterback at 3, or the other buzz I'll get to momentarily is maybe a trade up. I think that makes the most sense to try to appease ownership, save the jobs of Dable and that. Maybe they win 7 or 8 games. They're competitive. They start grooming a young quarterback. Maybe that's a way for them to show progress and save their jobs. That's the situation they put themselves in. If they had went with a completely new regime, they could have potentially said we're going to take Abdul Carter if he's there, or Travis Hunter, and we're going to bypass the quarterback, and we'll just get a real stopgap. Who, whatever plays, however it happens, it happens. But once they brought them back, and he said they got to win, you start opening this up now for a situation where you got to try to get the best veteran available, which was why they were going after Stafford, but that would have involved heavy draft compensation, multiple years. So while it would have been a kind of excitement level to get better quarterback play, the Stafford deal would have never made a lot of sense long term. But for Rodgers, for the short term and then drafting a quarterback, that makes a lot of sense to try to somehow satisfy both things, even if it's an epic fail like it was for the Jets this past year. Well, then it doesn't really matter, because then Dable and Joe Shane are going to be fired anyway, and it's going to be a new regime. So I think Aaron Rodgers to the Giants makes a lot of sense. I almost think it's probably going to happen if Rodgers wants to stay in New York. I could see him, trying to get Devontae Adams there as well, paired with Malik Neighbors. That could be an interesting thing. So I kind of almost think that's going to be the path they go. And then the second thing is a lot of buzz that the Giants and Titans might be talking trade. I could see that. I have some mixed reservations on that. If the Giants clearly value one quarterback significantly higher, and there was some buzz from the combine today that said the disparity between Ward and Sanders might be greater in NFL circles than it is in the consensus, I think they're pretty close. They're very different prospects, but I think they're very close in terms of their draft grades. But if the Giants clearly view the athletic and physical traits higher of Cam Ward, then I think moving from 1 to 3 makes a lot of sense to get their guy, especially with a lot of buzz that Cleveland wants to take quarterback. Where I have my reservations is if the disparity between the two quarterbacks on the Giants board is not that different, or if they have Shadu Sanders ahead of Ward, that's where I think trading up I am not a fan of, because they're going to have to give up some good assets to get from 3 to 1. It's just the reality of the situation. I do not think under any circumstance they should do that for Shadu Sanders. As much as I like Sanders, I don't think other teams are craving to get to 1 or 2 for Sanders. So for me, if the Giants could just stay there at 3, take Sanders, and then go with Rodgers and then Sanders. On the flip side, if they think Cam Ward's their guy and they have a clear difference in grades between Ward to Sanders, then I understand leapfrogging Cleveland, getting to the number 1 pick, getting your guy in Cam Ward, and also bringing in Aaron Rodgers. I think that's the highest ceiling path for the Giants, Aaron Rodgers and Cam Ward. I think Aaron Rodgers and Sanders at 3 make a lot of sense. Where I struggle is do not go to 1 if it's for Sanders. And if the grade between Ward and Sanders is not much different, then I don't like going up to 1, because I think you could stay at 3, keep the valuable assets that they so desperately need, and still get one of them there if it's a slight difference. They seem to really love Drake May and Jane Daniels last year. If the difference between like Ward and Sanders is whatever they thought between Daniels and May, however they had it last year, if it's close like that, then no, I don't think they should be trying to leapfrog up to number 1, give up a lot of assets. I don't think it's going quarterback. With Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, I think one of those guys at least is going in the top 2 picks. And then I think the Giants could stay at 3 and get one of the quarterbacks if they like both of them and have a small difference between the 2. So those are some of the big storylines, potential trade between the Giants and the Titans. Aaron Rodgers connected to the Giants, Matthew Stafford staying. I think those are the big storylines surrounding free agency, trade, offseason that weren't combine directed exactly. So, guys, if you're enjoying this content, please give it a website, SS Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out the premium content tab for $9.99. You get access to all of our premium notebooks. You get the scouting notebook, almost 100 detailed player profiles, all up to date. Only thing I need to finalize is the heights and weights and update the 2024 statistics. Everything else has been updated. If I need to add anybody that I think could be a top 100 prospect or so, I will. But there's tons of prospects in there who are not top 100 guys that I already had in there and updated. But I'll probably only add new guys there if I think they have a real shot at the top 100. You got the rankings notebook, all my different rankings updated regularly. I have to go in sometime soon and adjust some tight end rankings for sure with what we saw tonight from Gunnar Helm and some of the other tight ends. And then in April, you get the draft projections notebook, which is basically the basis of what I've been tweeting out during every combine run. My film thoughts and evaluations on almost 400 prospects, a quick snapshot of how they win, easy to understand the traits that I think make them stand out in terms of how they win, some developmental areas, combine testing numbers, measurements, all in one place, ranked in order in terms of how I expect them to come off the board, tabs for every position, offense and defense, and then a tab projecting the top 32 picks to be taken in the draft, projecting the 100 prospects to be taken in the top 100, and then our guess at trying to project every single player that gets taken in the NFL draft based on everything we're hearing, listening, reading, not our direct thoughts. Almost a guide to what we expect to happen on draft weekend. We've had tremendous success with our draft projections notebook. Hope you're enjoying these short instant reaction combine pods. 2 more still to go. Tomorrow's going to be the fun one. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs hit the field. A lot of fantasy and dynasty implications. So looking forward to breaking it all down tomorrow night. So on behalf of my sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.